In this short lecture, I will talk about urbanization. I will focus on three major questions. The first one is, what is an urban place? The second one is, what is urbanization? And the third one is, how to measure urban changes. Looking at these two pictures, you can tell right away which one is the city and which one is the countryside. But what is the definition of a city? If a rural village in Asia has a large population and decides to build many tall buildings and wide boulevards inside their village, does that turn their village into a city? To talk about world urbanization, first we need to understand what defines an urban place. The definition of what makes a city changes from time to time and from place to place, but it's most usual to explain the term as a matter of demographics. The U.S. defines urban places as any locality with more than 2,500 population. In Sweden, the term is applied to population centers with 200 or more residents. A second common way to define an urban place is based on the economic function, based on how many people are employed in the non-agricultural work. The last way to define a city is based on administrative criteria, which is the municipal boundary set by the governments. Defining a city based on administrative criteria is very important because these city boundaries are used by the census bureaus to generate various kinds of data about cities, such as population, employment, and economic data. And these data are the foundation to all kinds of research, such as scientific research and market research. Governments of different countries in the world have different administrative systems, which sometimes make international comparison very complicated. In the US, there are two important administrative boundaries related to cities. They are called Metropolitan Statistical Area and Principal City. Let's use Columbus as an example. City of Columbus, as we know it, is a principal city. Most of the city is inside the Franklin County. The Columbus Metropolitan Statistical Area, on the other hand, covers 10 counties, including Franklin County. So it is the green area in the middle of this map. Now we know what is an urban place. The next question is, what is urbanization? A short answer would be, urbanization is the process of people moving to live in urban places. A formal definition would be, urbanization is the process by which large numbers of people become permanently concentrated in relatively small areas, forming cities. This figure shows the percentage of world population living in urban areas over the past 500 years. You can see, even though all of us have lived in a largely urbanized world, mass urbanization is actually a very recent phenomenon in our civilization. Now we move on to talk about the third question, how to measure urban changes. There are three major ways to measure urban population changes. I will explain them one by one. The first way to measure urban changes is to calculate the level of urbanization, which means the percentage of population living in urban places. It is very simple to calculate. You divide the number of people living in urban areas with the total population of the region that you're measuring. In most cases, we measure the level of urbanization of countries, so it would be the total population of a country. This table shows the level of urbanization in a few countries. You see the world average is 56%, US is 82%, Japan, Brazil, UK are higher than the US, and Russia is a bit lower than the US, and China's urbanization rate is just above the world average, and India is way below. The second way to measure urban changes is to look at the distribution of population between different sizes of urban places. In this method, we don't just care about if people live in the urban places or rural places. We also care about what kind of urban places they live in. Are they concentrated in a few super large cities? Or are they dispersed in many small-sized cities? In this map, the height of the spikes represents the population density per square mile in each city. Longer spikes means higher density. So you can see that New York City is super dense, and there are also many high-density large cities in the surrounding region. Chicago region also has a cluster of dense urban areas. And on the western coast, there are the Los Angeles and San Francisco city clusters. And in most of the other regions in America, people live in cities with smaller city size and lower densities. The third way to measure urban changes is to look at the stages of urban development in terms of concentration and deconcentration in different parts of the cities. This figure illustrates how the 4 stages of urban development is defined based on the concentration and deconcentration of people. It's a bit complicated. Normally, I would draw something on the board to explain this, but now with this recorded PowerPoint, I will use a few slides to explain it. First, we have our city. We call it Metropolitan A. It has a city center and a suburban ring. There are also other cities in this simplified world. We use Metro B and Metro C to represent them. Between these cities are the rural areas and small towns. When a large number of people moving from the countryside to the city, and most of the people are concentrated in the city center, we are in the stage of urbanization. After decades of urban and industrial development, the city center is now crowded and heavily polluted. And with the availability of highway and private cars, people started to move outwards to the suburban areas to look for larger living space and better environments. As a result, the city core is losing population, but the suburban areas are gaining population, and there are continuous rural to urban migration. So overall, the entire metropolitan area is still growing. This phase is called suburbanization. Now we move on to the third stage. In this stage, our city A lost in a competition with the other cities B and C. So people in both the core and the suburbs started to move out and relocate to cities B and C. As a result, the entire metropolitan region is losing population, and this is what desurbanization means. So the last stage is reurbanization. This happens when people start to reappreciate urban life for its entertainment and cultural facilities, for its excitement, and for the ability to walk on the streets and avoid long-distance commuting. It also happens with the promotion of sustainable urban development, because living in a dense urban center is more energy efficient than living in the low-density suburbs. This phase of reconcentration in the city center is called reurbanization. To summarize, in the first method, we measure if people are living in the cities or in the rural areas. In the second method, we measure if people are living in the large cities or the smaller cities. And in the third method, we measure if people are living in the urban core or in the suburban areas.